That's it, Lucy. I think we're live now. So we'll make a start there very shortly.
Great.
I'm just kind of having a quick look at our numbers with 360 plus and going up rapidly. So we'll just give it a second, I think, and then we'll make a start. I'm going to turn this thing on as well. Share. Okay, 400 and going up. Okay, I'm going to make a start, Lucy, because for everybody that's punctual and people will get the recording anyway after this. So I'm going to say good evening and welcome. And my name is Emmet Major. I'm the coordinator of this program called Planet Youth, which you'll see there on the screen, out in the west of Ireland, Galway Mayo Common. And it's a program that we've been operating out here since 2018. And I'm going to just give you a quick introduction to why we're here tonight before handing you over to Lucy, and I'll explain how this evening is going to go as well. But I just prepared a short presentation just to tell you a tiny bit about this and some of the interesting stuff that we found in the survey related to sleep, which is really why we put on or organised this evening's event. So bear with me for a minute. So Planet Youth, what is it? It's a public health programme designed to improve the health and life and long-term health outcomes, I suppose, for our school-going population. So all of the young people in our secondary schools in the west of Ireland, and also the children that are currently making their way through national school. So it's quite a big undertaking. Brought in here from Iceland, of all places, where they used it to dramatically reduce, go from the highest to having the lowest substance use rates in the developed world by using an approach called primary prevention, which they sort of invented, but certainly developed to where they have it now, which is the idea that you can prevent problems arising in the next generation of young people by taking an evidence-based approach. And the way we're using it here in Ireland, we're certainly interested in the substance use of our young people because that's a big long-term health problem for us here in Ireland. But we can see in our data other issues that we can address using a primary prevention approach. So things like sleep would be a concern, screen use, mental health, physical activity, lots of different things that we can use this approach to work with here in Ireland. It's supported by a lot of our agencies out here in the region. You'll recognise some of the logos there, the HSE and TUSLA being obvious ones, our county councils, the Regional Drug Task Force, our education training boards, including MSLETB. And the way this program works is by addressing the risk and protective factors in the lives of young people. So what we're trying to do is change the environment they're growing up a little bit, right? So that unbeknownst to themselves, their health outcomes improve over time, right? The way that it works is that we survey our young people on their return to school every 2 years, right? So having sat the junior cert and coming back to school, you're 15 or you're 16 years old. And in all the schools in the west of Ireland, there's 81 of them and 10 youth reach centres. So 91 in total take part. And all of the children sit down and fill in this hour-long questionnaire. Very extensive. It's asking them all about their lives, how they're getting at home, what sports and hobbies they do, what they're doing on the internet, how do they feel about their mental health. There's all sorts of subjective well-being scales, international validated scales. Thorough, extremely thorough, certainly. And I asked them about their substance use, all sorts of life experiences, that kind of thing. I'll tell you a tiny bit more about that in a second, but it's a big undertaking. You can see here, these are the boxes of survey forms as they arrive into Parkmore before they go out to the schools. It's about 6,500 of them there. They go out, they're in schools. Each child fills one in and puts it back in the box when they're finished, and those go shipped off to Iceland. They're confidential documents. So any child that fills this in, we don't know. We don't know one child from the next. But what we do know is which child went to which school and which school is in which county, obviously. So we can generate school and county reports and area-based reports based on the data. So that's a lot of boxes and a lot of weight. It goes to Iceland. It gets scanned optically. And what we are trying to do with all of this undertaking is take the voice of the young people at 15 and 16 years old, so these guys, and what they're telling us about their lives to improve the situation for the children coming behind, so the kids coming in to our schools in first year, our 12 and 13-year-olds, but all the way back to the children that are actually just starting life in our national schools. So if we want to improve the long-term health outcomes of our young people, it's back here that we can do the best work by starting, right? One of the first things we did back in 2019 when we were starting this was develop a guidelines booklet for parents that was based on the data that we saw in the first survey. And there were some information there around sleep, a little bit about the Planet Youth Project, the importance of spending time with our young people and having quality time with them as they get older so that they can come and talk to us about any issues. There was guidelines around screen use. There was guidelines around bedtimes. I'm not going to dwell on this. I'll send all these slides on to people so people can have a look at them in their own time. There was guidelines around hobbies and sports and the importance of keeping young people and their teens engaged in these kind of activities. We know from other countries that are doing Planet Youth and doing it well that if young people are engaged in extracurricular, it doesn't have to be sports, it can be any kind of structured, supervised hobby. It could be music or drama or volunteering or mucking out stables. It actually, what matters is that they're kept active in stuff that interests them. Substance use is a bit of a concern for us here in Ireland. We're very high for underage alcohol use, particularly. Our cannabis use is going up, and we have something of an issue around supply of alcohol. The children that are getting alcohol from your parents, and you can give alcohol to your child here in Ireland as a parent, your own child, they're actually getting quite a bit more drunk than the kids who aren't. So instead of 20% of children, being drunk in the last month, the kids that are getting alcohol from their parents, I think it's 59% of them reported drunk in the last month. So here in Ireland, we seem to have a bit of an issue around substance use, but also parental supply of substances is not working out the way we might hope when we give alcohol to our kids. Now, one of the things we were trying to get to a little bit that's worked very well in other places, the idea of parents working together a bit more. So when parents come into our schools in first year, and all of a sudden you have 8 years of national school, you don't really know anybody anymore. All the friends change, communication changes, it gets very hard to know what's going on. So that the idea of getting to know other parents in your new secondary school or joining the Parents Association and so on, a bit trickier now with COVID naturally, but having common boundaries and having similar bedtimes or having an idea of, handing the phone up at night before bed, if everybody was doing something similar, it would make life so much easier for everybody else. And sharing information, really a very well-known protective factor, but not something we do in any kind of structured way here in Ireland. So something we're trying to work on introducing. We're developing at the moment, it'll be ready by the end of the year, some guidelines for parents of children in our primary schools. So it will be covering things like sleep and bedtimes, screen time, and so on. Actually, these will be the 6 main kind of areas within it. So family time, sleep and bedtimes, screen time, sports and hobbies, making small changes at home if you think you need to. But this idea of parents working together. So what we want to do is in our national schools, maybe the idea of coming up with classroom agreements around things like birthday parties or what age, how much screen time should a child have, maybe not giving all the kids in the class, nobody's going to get a phone until they're going to secondary, that kind of thing. So there's quite an appetite for that sort of approach here, but we just have to tease it out and move it along, which kind of brings me a little bit back around to tonight. I just wanted to alert you to this a little bit. I know a lot of this has gone out through the schools and on social media, and we have people from all over national. Actually, I think we have some people coming internationally to have a look at this because they're very curious to see. But one of the things that really jumped out of the the December 2020 survey, when we did the analysis earlier on this year, was the amount of sleep that the children are getting is nothing like enough. So we can see here, at 9 hours or more, we have only 10% of our 15, 16-year-olds. That's only 10% getting the required or recommended amount of sleep. 31% are at 8 hours, which is just, it's doing okay at that. They'll get by on that. Everybody else sleep deprived, right? So these guys at 35% getting 7 hours, 16% getting 6 hours, the 8% getting less than 6 hours are doing worse in every single measurable way. And I'll show you some of it now than the kids on the left there. The 41% are doing so much better than the 59% in all sorts of ways. So we'll just have a quick look at this. There's a correlation between what's a validated scale within the survey. Rosenberg scale is called around self-esteem. And this is the percentage of students that report, when you look at the scale together, around this would highlight low self-esteem. So at 9 hours, you can see 35% are coming in at the low end of this scale. And this is, as it goes up, you can see 8 hours, 7 hours. So the kids getting 6 hours and then less than 6 hours. And there's a lot of them, 24% of them, you can see where they are for low self-esteem. Okay. School engagement. The school engagement really, largely speaking, means being happy going into school. It's nothing to do very much with academics, but it's just getting on well in school, enjoying school, being present, enjoying what school has to offer. And again, such a dramatic difference between the guys that are getting the sleep they need and the ones that aren't. Here's one that's more academically related to finding schoolwork hard, not as dramatic, right? But Again, the children who aren't getting enough sleep aren't doing so well. This metric of often or always finding schoolwork is hard, right? Or here's one for you. I try my best in school, kind of one that's one item out of the scale. But I agree or strongly agree that I try my best in school. It kind of stands to reason. We're the same as adults. If we're not getting the sleep we need from going into the office or going off to work or wherever we're working, we're not going to perform as well if you're not sleeping well. And you're certainly not going to perform as well if you're not sleeping well over a period of time. And it's just so apparent in the data. Here's one very dramatic. Will tell you these are the children that tell you what they feel about their mental health. I feel that I have good or very good mental health. And again, 66, 67, 62% for the kids who are doing okay for sleep. And then again, it falls off very dramatically. Same, not quite as dramatic for physical health, but it's there. Correlation, how I feel about my physical health is very good. Anger, again, people are narky if they're not sleeping well, but it's very clear in the data. These are the kids that are reporting on the high level of the anger scale. And again, hugely clear in the data. And this one now, I just think this is one item out of a scale that's kind of more related to subjective well-being. I could show you the whole scale. It looks like this, but I just thought I'd end on this one because I thought it was something that parents would really resonate with parents. This idea of happiness, right? I'm happy, right? And again, the kids that are getting their 9 of their 8 hours, so many of them are able to tick yes to that question, right? And yet down here at the other, the lower end of the spectrum, it's affecting their lives so much that this is what we're beginning to see in the data, right? So I'm going to shut up very shortly. What I wanted to say, though, is that causation and correlation are not necessarily the same thing. I could say that the other way around. Correlation and causation are not the same thing. What does that mean? It means that somebody feels bad about happiness or mental health or that kind of thing, they're not always completely intertwined. But in the numbers that we see in the data, right, it's telling us that there's too many of our kids going to sleep too late and not getting enough sleep. There's all sorts of reasons why that might be the case. Phones will drive a lot of it, and screens in bedrooms will drive a lot of it. There can be other reasons. People can live in chaotic home situations. There can be underlying health issues, underlying mental health issues. There can be a home where the parents are on shift works and aren't at home to supervise kids going to bed. There's loads of reasons why children won't be getting the sleep that they need. But by and large, if we can improve on bedtimes, and phones out of bedrooms, that will make a big difference. So if you want to know a bit more about the project at all, you can get in touch with me through the Planet Youth website. I'm going to stop sharing this and I'll bring us back, hopefully, in the main room. And I'm going to hand you over very shortly to Lucy, who's going to take us through what she has to say about the importance of sleep for teenagers. And I know you've done great work in preparing. This isn't your natural milieu, let's call it, this is not the sort of thing you do naturally, but having teenagers yourself, you understand obviously some of the challenges, and you've been very kind to go away and prepare some useful information in this space. So I'm really appreciative of that, Lucy. And what we're going to do, I'm going to turn my screen off very shortly, and what I will do is come back to you when you're wrapping up, Lucy, and we'll look at doing a bit of a Q&A. I have some questions that came in on email. But what I might do is, if you want to submit a question, you can use the chat function. I see lots of people inputting on the chat here. But if you want to put a question to Lucy, don't put your name per se. You can put it into private comment or something like that. Or if you want to put it more anonymous, you can send it in to me on the private thing, or change the name of the child, whatever. You don't need to, give us all the nuts and bolts of the situation. Just give us a bit of an idea what you want to ask. And I'll be collecting all that behind the scenes, and I'll try and put as much of that as I can to Lucy at the end. So that's the plan. We're going to be roughly an hour from now that we'll be finishing up. And I'm going to hand you over to Lucy, unless I've missed anything, Lucy. Is there anything I need to say? Or
no, I think that's all good. That's perfect. And I can see the different things popping up in the chat room as well, which I obviously couldn't see the last day because I'm on a different device.
Okay.
And
I tell you what, that'll only distract you. So let me look after that, right?
Okay,
and
brilliant.
We'll get to that at the end. Okay, so
perfect. And then just to share that I'm not going to share a screen there the way that Emmet did, because it makes me too anxious, and I'm better if I just speak with you tonight au natural, and then there is supporting documentation with the with the references and everything that I'll be sending to Emmet, that he will then post with the video, and you'll be able to source it then as well. So I mentioned there about being anxious. Yes, we did this last week for primary school children, and I was so anxious I forgot to introduce myself. So tonight I need to tell you that my name is Lucy Wolfe and I'm a sleep consultant. I'm a co-creational parent and relationship mentor. I'm the author of The Baby Sleep Solution and all about the Baby Sleep Solution. And I think importantly for this particular presentation, I'm mom of 4 children, aged 19, 17, 14, and 11. So I feel that although my natural habitat, as Emmet has mentioned, is within the younger age range, when Emmet presented his research findings to me, I was compelled to get involved because I feel so strongly about helping our children sleep better, be better rested, feel like they are optimally well rested, and then as a result potentially have lower risks. So before we start to talk about the sleep, I actually wanted to talk about being a teenager. And I feel like we need to understand, and I'm sure that you do, that it is a crucial, the crucial process in the teenage years is about starting to become your own person. And, you know, it's about becoming independent. It's about taking responsibility for yourself and for your own actions. And it's about finding the safety for our teens to be true to themselves and to be real and authentic. That's the quest that they go on. And as parents, our continued task is to provide a psychologically safe, warm, responsive, attentive family culture with unconditional loving responses, boundaries, and understanding while we host this amazing process that is not without its challenges. And I guess the challenges are primarily concerned with our children finding their own particular open and real expression to the several aspects of themselves. And that ranges from emotional, physical, behavioral, intellectual, social, sexual, and creative. We can support our teens by, first of all, reflecting on our own sense of self, expressing unconditional love, and having open communication with our children that allows our adolescents to come into their own decisions with our support. We're going to actively listen. And when we say actively listen, I try to get you to think about listening with your mind, your body, your heart, and your soul. To be present to the different opinions that start to arise as our children get older, to value and respect their opinions, and to continue to find ways to get to know them, and expressing belief in their capacity. Now, that's not to mean that we're not going to be specific. We're going to provide positive feedback for efforts that they make to be responsible, but we're also going to challenge actions that threaten their own well-being and that of another. Our task, and as difficult as it can be, is to stay emotionally present at those key times, specifically those mornings, meal times, and bedtimes. And they're really critical too to developing a strong sense of self. I think it's important as well that we become open about our own thoughts, our feelings and experiences with our children, and that we create natural opportunities for engagement, and that our communication comes from an I place rather than a you place. Now, sleep itself is necessary to ensure we're optimally functioning. I think Emmet's research is powerful. It demonstrates that sleep's not just rest. And while we are sleeping, our brain and our body is repairing and restoring and supervising a wide variety of biological maintenance jobs that support our immunity, our muscle growth, emotions, and brain processing, ensuring that we and our children can function at this optimum level that I've mentioned by day, and to live a nourishing and healthy life. Without adequate sleep, there's a burden on our children's health and well-being. So cognitive and behavioral consequences may result in poor judgment, lack of motivation, inattention, poor decision-making. The influence on the mood, that they will be much more vulnerable to depressive symptoms. And unfortunately, there is associated links between sleep loss and suicidality in adolescence. Increased overweight and obesity risks, and there's a large body of evidence from studies that assess the relationship between short sleep and obesity, and it is compelling and obviously has far-reaching implications. And then obviously just another mention that drowsy driving accidents for our young drivers, they are at risk, young inexperienced drivers, with a large percentage of them admitting to driving while sleep impaired, and there is a clear link between increased crashes and near misses as well. So there are types of sleep you'll be familiar with already, I'm sure. So sleep itself is categorized into two main stages: rapid eye movement, which you've probably seen, REM sleep, and NREM sleep, which is the rapid eye movement sleep. I'm not going to get bogged down in it hugely, but NREM sleep has 4 of its own stages, and our bodies go through these stages of sleep, and the length of the sleep cycle is about 90 minutes, and we will transition through the sleep cycles in the sleep phases, and we go between those active phases. Each sleep cycle, like I said, is about 90 minutes, and each person starts to cycle through the sleep stages, and they have partial arousals as we transition through each sleep phase. What I think is important to mention is that there are 2 processes that regulate sleep. Although falling asleep and staying asleep are rooted in our child's biology, just like language and motor skill, sleep matures over the first few years of our children's lives. But the onset of puberty is linked with changes to how our children experience their sleep. These 2 main processes are the homeostatic sleep drive and the circadian system. So just really briefly, the homeostatic sleep drive is like the pressure that builds the longer you are awake, and then this releases when we go to sleep. The other system, the circadian rhythm and the internal body clock, is a system that regulates sleep, and it begins with a powerful internal clock that's nestled in the brain. This clock is a biological pacemaker. It controls the circadian rhythm, and it allows us to initiate the light and the dark pattern of day and night. The internal clock sends messages throughout the day, influencing our wake pattern and many other biological processes. Ideally, as bedtime approaches, our temperature drops, the level of sleep-inducing chemical melatonin rises in preparation for sleep, and then toward morning, the activating cortisol level rises, and that alerts the body to awaken. Now, theoretically, the alignment of these 2 processes predicts the maintenance of wakefulness and alertfulness during the daytime and maintenance of sleep at night. The ideal balance between the systems is challenged during adolescence, as both processes show developmental changes and behavioral demands and choices that we make that further alter the balance. So the sleep-wake behavior that changes across adolescence are the product of changing regulatory sleep mechanisms and evolving psychosocial factors. A hallmark of behavioral change is that your child's bedtime starts to get later, and the onset of puberty has been linked to this. Also around this time, parents' set bedtimes do become less common, and staying up later to study. I've seen a few of you already posting around that, to train, exercise, spend time on electronic media, for example, all do contribute to later bedtimes. A recent report demonstrated that 70 to 88% of our children are spending time on social media sites daily. Studies also reflect that the light from the media screens may also delay the circadian system and the increased alertness, which is then further exacerbated by the already delayed circadian system of our teens, and in turn reduces the amount of sleep that's achieved. So later bedtimes and necessarily early wake times governed by school start times potentially reduce sleep opportunity for the average teenager. One question that often arises, and it's not clear, whether sleep lost during the week can be recovered during the weekend, with some children able to recover some of the sleep that they've lost and others not. And then with a typical later bedtime on the weekend as well, we seem to be continually adding to the sleep debt. Changes to the weekday versus the weekend sleep often further results in sleep irregularity. And for many, this then adds to some of the reported sleep issues. So let's say, for example, your child sleeps an extra 4 hours in the morning on Saturday morning, and they do the same thing again on Sunday morning. Well, then it's very difficult for them to go to sleep at the right time at bedtime on Sunday night. And this sort of puts them into a jet lag situation. So common sleep issues, probably in this range, might be represented by trouble falling asleep, reporting they're not able to switch off, waking up overnight, being restless and not feeling well rested. What I will also say in this cohort that often the issues are parent reported rather than the child, as your child may not truly realize how sleep loss and their relationship with sleep is actually affecting their well-being. I like to talk about relationships that influence sleep. So as well as the biological factors and the emerging chronotype that influences their sleep. So chronotype is, you probably already have heard of, some people more likely to stay up late and some people more likely to want to go to bed early and get up early. That's your chronotype, and that starts to emerge in the teenage years. So their ongoing understanding in relationships with sleep, your child's ongoing understanding in relationship with sleep, and your relationship with them, their relationship with you, their relationship with themselves and their peers have a significant impact. The relationship with the sleep environment, their activity, with their food and their drink choices, and the example that we are showing them all can influence sleep tendencies. I saw it in the chat room before I began about peers, and peers have a massive influence on all aspects of our teenagers. And we have this inherent fear of missing out that seems to stimulate a need to belong almost at any cost. So I'm talking tonight about behaviourally induced as well as those biological factors, but I also need to mention, although it's outside of my scope, that obviously further consideration must include underlying medical issues, food sensitivities, intolerances, upper airway problems, asthmas, coughs, sleep disordered breathing, skin problems like eczema, dental problems, cavities, irritated gums, headaches, restless leg syndrome, and pain like ear infections or internal pain will all affect your sleep. And of course, I will encourage you to consult with your GP or your dental practitioner in a collective of what we're also discussing about tonight. So as I mentioned earlier about being in relationship, I want to explore the relationship with the sleep environment first, so that we're setting the scene. Our job as parents with our teenagers is really to provide the context. So first of all, the bedroom itself probably needs to be the coolest room in the house when it comes to bedtime. And this helps to initiate the sleep hormone, but it also helps to our body temperature drop in order to initiate the cocktail of hormones that is needed for us to initiate sleep. So I would look for that dynamic. Now, if you're going to ask me about a temperature with young children, we normally look for 16 to 28 degrees. But in this age group, we might look for lower, more like an adult room temperature, which can range between 12 and 16 degrees. But what I would always encourage you to do is think about what feels right for you. I want you to think about the quality of the mattress and the bedding, and when was the last time you replaced the mattress, so that it's now age relevant and supportive enough for your young child and your adolescent, your growing child, and then that any bedding that you're using, that they appreciate the feel and the texture. Just looking at the pillow, that the pillow fits between the space between their head and their shoulder, and that you help them invest in comfortable clothing. And I think it's very important that we always get ready for bed, and that we'd avoid falling asleep anywhere other than the bed itself. Again, I'm going to encourage you to look at the bedroom, unclutter the room, clean and air, vacuum regularly. And again, I'm not suggesting that you do all of this. I definitely would be encouraging our teenagers to be part of this. And then also to help sleep, I'd be inclined to look at blackout blinds, curtains, avoiding hall lights, bathroom lights, ensuite lights. If you are using night lights, not in the eye line, and sometimes using an eye mask can be helpful, as well as looking at eliminating loud or sudden noises. Sometimes I might use white noise as a barrier for unwanted disturbances. Like if you have a next door's dog that often barks, or your next door neighbor gets up early in the morning also waking, I might just look at a noise barrier. But if I use a noise barrier, I leave it on for the entire sleep period. The other relationship I look at is the relationship to activity. Okay, so together with your child, I think it's so important that we discussed the importance and the value of sleep. And I feel we need to explore this topic and gather their unique insights. I noticed as we began, lots of people talking about this needing to be presented in schools to encourage our children. And yes, I agree. I also feel it always starts with us. To really encourage our young children to start to understand the importance of sleep, just like we have helped them understand the importance of a healthy diet and exercise and fitness. So as you navigate this topic with your child, I always think it's important that we agree and commit to a suitable bedtime. And considerations will include possibly when they do feel tired, what time they must be awake by, and how much sleep that they do require. And I realize that I've skipped that important slide to say that in this age group, the amount of sleep that we're generally hoping for is somewhere between 8 and 10 hours. And again, although I'm not always going to put huge emphasis on the amount of sleep because we love quality and quantity in equal measure, I think it's good to understand that it's somewhere in that area, in that bandwidth. And I also think that it's important that we realize that some teens just naturally are unable to achieve sleep much before 11 p.m. Now, I know some of you will be talking about your children not being able to get to sleep until 1, 2, and 3 o'clock in the morning. But again, a natural bedtime is going to be somewhere in this area. And again, I really want us to help our children understand and review the importance of regularity. So I mentioned to you there briefly about the circadian rhythm, the circadian system. And again, regularity is a big part of that. Waking up the same sort of time, going to sleep at the same sort of time, and understanding that how and what we do and when we do it can really help or hinder how we experience our sleep. So I really want you to help them and encourage them to commit to the same bedtime and the same wake time every day of the week, 7 days a week. Variation ideally is not more than an hour. And I know there is temptation to let them sleep on the weekends. And if I'm honest with you, if you are struggling with your child's sleep, I'd be very much inclined to commit to a month where we just have that regular wake time every day of the week. And I wouldn't have any variability if you are struggling with your child falling asleep or maintaining their sleep, as long as that continues to be a concern. And look, I might even make it like a in-house challenge where maybe we allocate a month to implementing this, and then we can see how it may help to shape their sleep profile. And I do think it's important that maybe we would keep a sleep diary to understand this more. I just see there, I'm not sharing slides today. I will be sharing the slides after the, to go with the recording of the meeting. Just in terms of the wake time, I will encourage that as well as it's regular that we avoid the snooze button. I know we're probably all a little bit guilty of this. And I think, of course, it probably goes without saying that if we're asking our children, our teenagers to commit to certain activities, I do also think it's important that we model what we're asking of them as well. You know, we are going to talk about use of electronic media. We are talking about regular bedtimes. I think if they see us prioritizing our sleep, I think that's a really good incentive as well. And I do understand, having 3 and nearly 4 teenagers of my own, that it isn't easy. It is difficult. But again, it's our task to try to keep creating what I describe as being the fertile ground to allow this to happen. In the early morning time when we're waking up, just mentioned there about not pressing the snooze button too many times or at all if you can help it, and getting up and starting the day. We will obviously talk about a bedtime routine shortly, but I think we don't talk enough about post-sleep rituals, what we do when we wake. And I think it's very important that when we are creating a wake time, that wake time allows us enough time in the morning so we avoid feeling rushed or stressed before actually leaving the house, and that we keep remembering that connecting at those key times in the morning and the evening really do help our children. And I feel sometimes a bit fraudulent talking about that because I know how stressed I can be in the morning time trying to get everyone out the door and do everything that needs to be done. But again, if we just give ourselves enough time, sometimes that can be a little less stressful as a result. Exposing and ensuring and encouraging our children have exposure to bright and natural light, especially in the morning, can help regulate the sleeping patterns. So what we're really doing here is trying to help regulate the body clock. Having a regular bedtime, having this regular wake time every day of the week for a while, exposure to bright natural light, plenty of outdoor activity throughout the course of the day, and where possible, exposing them to bright and natural light in the morning time. But as the evening unfolds and we start to initiate relaxing activities that we're also going to talk about shortly, we might encourage the use of dim light to help encourage the production of the sleep hormone melatonin. I know this isn't an easy one, but it is a recommendation that we do try to avoid training or exercise 2 to 3 hours before bedtime where possible. I know my own children have trained late on evenings, and I know that can happen. But maybe if we think about not having too many nights that's happening, also can help support their sleep profile as well. The relationship with their food and their drink. I think it's important that maybe we support our children to eat and drink at the same times every day. I'm going to say that we encourage them to eat breakfast. I know that can be difficult too, but again, it helps to regulate the blood sugar levels and kickstart the metabolism. And of course, I'm going to talk about being mindful of caffeinated products, alcohol use, high sugar, refined carbohydrates, and nicotine all can have an impact. They act as a stimulate and deeply impact both our sleep onset, our maintenance, and our sleep totals. So caffeine, for example, can take 3 to 7 hours to eliminate from the system, and longer depending on the intake levels. Obviously, I'm going to say avoid entirely if possible. And I know it isn't always possible, but specifically in the afternoon and the evening setting. And to be mindful of over-the-counter medication that contains caffeine, as well as popular energy drinks. As well as that, I'd be avoiding heavy meals 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, but not going to bed hungry either. So I might consider a sleep promoting light supper. Sleep promoting foods include banana, wholemeal, oatmeal, dairy, honey, some nuts and seeds. All have sleep promoting qualities and can make up a supper to help bridge over for sending the right messages to the brain around sleep time. I know the relationship with electronic media and screens is huge. I know the struggle that comes with that. I'm going to share my own personal situation around that, and I'm also going to talk to you about findings. The National Sleep Foundation poll showed that as adolescents with just less than 4 media devices in their bedroom, slept significantly less on both school and non-school nights. They were more likely to fall asleep at school and while doing homework, and drank more caffeinated products too. On the other hand, and again, this is a bit like Emmet's research too, adolescents who reported getting more than 8 hours sleep per night engaged in less technology-related activities after 9 p.m. compared to their peers who reported getting less sleep. Another recent study found that children who slept with one small screen in their bed, so that could be a smartphone, or next to their bed, got 20 minutes less per night, and children with a television in their bedroom get 18 minutes less sleep per night. So the timing and the type of device is significant to understand, and that daytime TV exposure just on in the background, increased mobile phone use by day has also shown in some cases to impact sleep negatively and to increase daytime sleepiness. I'm going to suggest that we avoid TV or electronics an hour or more before bedtime. And the words I'm going to use is to set a loving boundary around this. I think it asks for deep and open conversations that are required, and for parents like you and me to set an example. My oldest son is 19, and I guess when he was in his early teens, we were total novices and really didn't know how to manage situations. We went through loads of different phases, arguing with him to give up the phone, banning the phone, having a Wi-Fi system that turned off at a certain time. And really what it led to was really poor relationships and arguments at the worst time possible, which is when we were going to bed. And so basically, I guess having a digital boundary, once you try and create it, it's sensible to try and replace this activity with another activity. So we were just taking things away, but we weren't replacing it with anything. And so when I replaced it with something, and in our house, we replaced it with family time, parent time, connection, I found that it was always welcome. And it's certainly, I would encourage it. So we call it a family meeting in our house. And it's been a really good way of getting everyone off devices, having some lovely connection time, relaxing. So it's kind of serving a function that they're not even aware of. And then we are sending them off to their bedrooms to do the rest of their bedtime routine. It may surprise you to know that ideally we prepare for bedtime about 1 to 1.5 hours before the set bedtime. It's kind of how long it takes to start to wind down the body. And again, what I might propose is that we set aside a time of 30 minutes to an hour of relaxing activity outside of the bedroom. And then maybe 20 to 30 minutes in the bedroom itself before lights out. So again, if you're thinking of, you know, a bedtime for 10 o'clock, let's say, it almost starts at 8:30, 9 o'clock in order to start to bridge the gap over. Now, in my own experience, as you're setting those times and as you're helping everyone acclimatize, there's more time invested. But as time unfolds and everyone gets used to it, then I do feel that time shrinks and it's not as onerous. Because, of course, another issue for us parents is that we feel like maybe we're never off ourselves, that we're, you know, doing and working all day, doing the competition of needs in the evening time between extracurricular activities, dinners, homework, organizing. And again, I'm very aware that we're never just maybe just dealing with one child, and maybe we're doing a number of children. And again, then it doesn't seem to be any time to turn off. But the other side of that is sometimes if we give a little bit more on this end, there is less stress and challenge on the other side. So again, some calming activities that I might recommend. My key recommendation is what we call family time here. Just for reference, I just do it in my bedroom. I wait for them. I sit on my bed at 8:30 and they filter in and we just chat about different things. It doesn't always end well. There's often arguments between them. They're feisty children at the same time. But again, the gadgets are down and then we're moving in and we're doing our little bits and pieces. We often do a word search, might do a crossword. One of them might do coloring, bit of puzzles, jigsaws. So it's that kind of activity. And that's the kind of activity that I'd encourage. It doesn't have to be with a parent. It can be done solo by your child and with family members. So listening to music, reading, like I said, word search, crosswords, drawing, coloring, puzzles, jigsaws, gentle stretching exercises, yoga, meditation, all would be relaxing activities ahead of time. And again, I suppose I'm just going to remind us all that it really is a deep-seated need of each child to feel seen, heard, safe, secure, and belonging to our holding world of family. It's important that we're creating that context and that we're honouring our children's individuality. And really, children of all ages, us included, flourish with a parent's loving presence. And that if we are able, you know, if we are fortunate enough to spend lots of one-to-one time connecting with our children, nothing to do with sleep even, just plenty of dialogue, lots of eye contact, meaningful presence, physical touch, practicing that active listening that I mentioned earlier, and just being wholly available to them, and just try to our best not to be distracted by modern life ourselves with phones whilst we are with them. I know it can often sound harder and easier said than done. I, of course, know that. But again, I think if we're struggling and we really want the best for our children, of course that we do, then I think some of the pieces of tonight's meeting would really just help you bridge the gap between maybe where you currently are and the struggles that you're having. And I obviously love the idea that Emma has suggested there as part of his project of trying to have parents collaborate, that if everyone is kind of committed to the same thing, then it can be easier, because that was one of our big issues as well, that my son didn't have his phone, but all his friends were texting all night. And so there's that big piece of missing out. Whereas if everybody is singing from the same hymn sheet, or nearly everybody, then that obviously is much easier. When you've done your little relaxing activities that happen ideally outside of the bedroom, I like to create that distinction that we come out of the bedroom, because your child may have been in their room studying or gaming, whatever it is that they're doing in their bedroom. I think it's good to come out and spend that time out of the bedroom doing the relaxing activities. And then when it's 20 minutes or so before lights out time, they go into their bedroom to do the rest of a bedtime routine. Now, this can be with or without a parent. It really depends on what fits your family and your own child. But essentially that maybe you'd encourage them to have a regular same a ritual every night, so that they have a couple of things that they do in the same order every night. It's almost like programming. And you know, that they have the chats, they read their book, they do some relaxation exercises or breathing exercises or visualizations or meditation. And again, look, reading would be a big one in our house here. And again, it's just that before lights out. So now you're kind of building bridges towards sleep and before lights out. I know that a lot of you will talk about the relationship that your child has with their thoughts and their feelings, worries and concerns that may arise. We do know that reports of stress and anxiety make up more than 40% of sleep issues experienced. By adults and adolescents alike, unwanted thoughts and feelings flood the mind. They increase the adrenaline, encouraging a fight, flight or freeze mode that makes going and or returning to sleep very challenging. The more each individual tries not to worry or think about certain things, the harder we try to go to sleep, the more elusive it becomes, which creates a cycle of tension psychologically between the person and their sleep relationship. So to try and address the cycle of tension, it is always necessary first to establish the root of the issues and to try and see the meaning and the metaphor of what is showing up. It may be helpful and sometimes even necessary to seek professional guidance to help your child and you to better understand what is causing what we might call anxiety in this instance in the first place. Uncovering the true source of what lies hidden, increasing understanding will help them to further on their journey to realness and authenticity that we mentioned earlier. From my own professional background, we're of the mind that all behavior makes sense and it represents an action for self or the need of an action for self, whatever that may be. And again, it's just about with that safe holding that this can be established. Journaling has been shown to be a very helpful way for an individual, adolescent and adult alike, to reflect and to work through what is arising for them. And incidentally, keeping a sleep diary can also be helpful when we're trying to figure out what helps and what doesn't help within your household. And I do think it's important to maybe think of things in months to 6 week long timelines as a result, because it's very difficult to see progress in a short space of time. I'm going to recommend, in terms of trying to help a child who is lying in bed and finding it really difficult to switch off, 2 different exercises, and again they are on slides that will accompany the video of tonight's presentation. But one is a breathing awareness exercise and one is a body scan, and it really is just again, you could print this off, you can stick it on their wall or give it to them to work through, but where they lie on their back with their arms relaxed by their sides. They take a few minutes to get comfortable and you're encouraging the person to bring awareness to their breathing, just concentrating on their breathing coming in and going out and just relaxing and just breathing normally, managing the air coming in and out. I'm sure some of you will already have heard of these type of exercises before, but again, it might be a reminder tonight for some of you to start encouraging our young adults to start encouraging them to use these strategies as well. So that's a breathing awareness exercise that they can go through. And again, you're really trying to concentrate on your breathing, no judgment, bringing your thoughts back to your breathing, concentrating on how your body feels, letting it sink into the mattress and just working on that basis. And then the body scan one is where you are thinking of your body and processing your mind, leaving your head and trotting through your body all the way through to your feet. And how do your feet feel? And wondering, are they ever relaxed? Are they tense? Are they sore? Again, not making any judgments, just scanning and observing how you feel. Imagining your toe and your foot muscles tightening and relaxing. So again, it's really taking the mind away from the concerns that your child will maybe having. And again, Patricia, thank you. The app that you've put in the group is another really helpful one for parents to consider, just encouraging their children to use when it's time for lights out. Just a couple of other little points to mention. Once we're in bed, and although there's a couple of different schools of thought around this, once we're in bed, this is my own professional consideration, that we avoid getting up and doing something else. That is often recommended around sleep, that if you've not gone to sleep in 20 minutes, get up and go and do something. Or if you've woken in the middle of the night and you don't go back to sleep within 20 minutes, so get up and go and do something. My own mindset is that we feel that maybe you train yourself to wake and do that then. So I think a resting body is better than a non-sleeping active body. So that once you're in bed, it's maybe about bringing in those exercises, that mindful meditation type exercises. And if you've woken up in the middle of the night and you can't go back to sleep, maybe just lying in your bed and reading or listening to the music again, to just try to help work on your body to be resting. And again, I suppose, although we've talked about numbers tonight, like how much sleep somebody needs or how many hours you might need and the less hours you get and what that all represents, but I really don't want to focus on time or amounts of sleep. I really just encourage the person just to be focused on being present and being mindful and on your breathing as outlined, because often when we struggle with our sleep, we do become focused on those numbers, and that recreates that cycle of tension that I mentioned earlier that we're trying to avoid if we can. Just going to add in a couple of natural suggestions again that might also support sleep, rest and relaxation, like magnesium spray, an Epsom salt bath, some essential oils like chamomile, lavender, camphor, vetiver, chamomile. You can have them is in a diffuser, in a candle, body lotion, bed and body spray. And again, it's not going to help you sleep tonight all the way through, but again, these things, they create rituals and they send the right message to the brain in some instances. Chamomile tea, lavender tea may also be another little addition. And also a salt therapy air purifier may be good if you have somebody who's suffering with upper respiratory, like sinus or snoring or asthma. So that would be my contribution around that particular area. Now, I want to thank you, first of all, for your attention so far and your presence this evening, and also for sharing your time with me. And I'm going to turn the floor back over to Emmet to see if there's any questions that you'd like me to address this evening.
Hi, Lucy. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Good. Yeah. Okay. Let me just run up another document here. I've been plugging away here in the background. Screens for reading.
Yeah.
Things like iPads and Kindles.
Yes.
Any thoughts on those?
Yes. So I suppose I would be, all screens have an effect. The Kindle is probably the least of the effect. I guess I probably wouldn't read off an iPad or another device other than a Kindle, if I'm honest with you. That would be my own take on it.
Yeah. Okay. I think you covered this quite a bit, really, but I'm just going to run it through again, right? Can you advise teenagers might deal with intrusive thoughts as they are trying to get to sleep or return to sleep? So blocking out thinking.
Yeah. And you see, I suppose, I know I probably didn't, I feel like, because it's not my natural field and there are people that are really qualified in mindfulness meditation, I feel that it's not, but I have provided how you might do it. And again, sometimes just engaging in a course is another good way of teaching our children how to do it for themselves. But at least this would be a starter or a taster. And I know that lots of parents have put different apps into the group there about meditation music and mindfulness apps that may also help as well. The only thing I just get a little bit worried about when we bring apps into the room, we're bringing the phones into the bedroom, whereas we sometimes are looking to have that digital boundary, and it's not always practical, maybe to not have phones in the bedroom. So that's why I guess I haven't really talked about apps and things like that.
Okay. I'm just going to go through. Okay. What about somebody who's basically always very unsettled sleep, maybe talk or during their sleep, grind their teeth, that kind of thing? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I suppose I'll always get you to talk about teeth grinding with your dentist for sure. And again, restless sleep, sleep talking. They're like a group of sleep phenomenons almost. Being under-rested can sometimes lead to that. So I'll always have a look at that first. Can we make any adjustments? Can we get an extra 20, 30, 40 an hour sleep on the front end? It's very hard to get more sleep on the other end, especially with school. Start times to get enough sleep. So very often is trying to have just a slightly earlier onset of sleep at bedtime. Yeah.
Okay. There's one here about, according to my son, his peers allowed the phones late at night and allowed to stay up past 11. I know there's no age, but doubtful this is the case, but how do I respond to this? Not that doubtful. I mean, we know, they don't release these figures that I've seen, but any of the companies that, like the young people like Snapchat and TikTok and people like that, there's huge traffic on those all night long. Throughout, and it's actually one of the more expensive times to advertise on those platforms is in the middle of the night. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if there's, that your son's peers have, got devices in their room. It's a big challenge to get them out.
It's a big challenge to get them out. And then sometimes there is the personal responsibility, and we're trying to create these self-managed individuals. And I know that is a journey and it isn't an overnight thing either. But again, if we start to really understand, the importance of sleep and the effect that it's having, especially if you have an individual who's been struggling in different areas, like you said yourself, it wasn't about doing well in school, it was about feeling engaged in school. And again, just feeling that little bit outside of themselves. And again, I really feel it's a collaborative, it's a cooperative between yourself and your family, as we really just try and initiate these tendencies. I explained there, I've been through my own gauntlet of maybe the fighting over the phones, but also I think that when we took the fight out of it and made it more personal responsibility scenario, I definitely feel that we made way more progress.
Thanks for that. I'm just looking here, just around this idea of circadian systems, right? Is there a possibility that circadian system is malfunctioning since birth? My 12-year-old daughter has had issues with sleep since birth, and it has continued her entire life. She would do anything not to go to sleep, or to not go to sleep, I should say.
I mean, I suppose my main field is working with young children, and I just find that early intervention obviously can be key. I obviously feel that if you did feel it was malfunctioning, it would, you'd need to, get a referral to a neuro specialist to see that your circadian rhythm, it's built in, and I think that because late bedtimes, irregular wake times, irregular timings for sleep, especially when our children are still napping, it sort of sends it into this sort of free fall scenario. So it's like in a jet lag scenario. Again, we talked tonight already about things that we can do to try and help regulate it. But if you're in any doubt, obviously, there's always potentially a little bit more to the story. So I'll always encourage you to seek further recommendations around that too.
Okay, just a quick one here, and maybe you could go over it again. I know we covered it already, but just catching up at the weekend, the idea. Now, usually it's like my child's not sleeping, but they're catching up the weekend. This one is maybe a little bit opposite, and saying the child actually sleeps okay during the week. Is it okay to allow them to sleep as long as they need at the weekend? My natural instinct that they wake when they need.
Yeah, you see, I suppose I mentioned that earlier about trying to have the same schedule 7 days a week and not to have huge variation. The standard recommendation is not more than an hour. It's not more than an hour variation. Now, again, it's about trying to see what works for your child. You could give them more, and provided it's not causing problems with them going to sleep and staying asleep, then it's a wonderful way of them catching up on their lost sleep. Another little question there that came in there about daytime sleep, like having a nap to catch up. And again, I wouldn't rule that out either. There are key times for us to maybe bridge the gap with naps, and the research kind of shows us about 30 minutes or as little as 10 minutes, but as much as 30 minutes can really have a good restorative effect. There are key nap windows, like between 5 and 7 p.m. and between 1 and 3 p.m. They're kind of like perfect nap windows. However, you need to nap with care. So if we nap and then we can't get to sleep, the napping dynamic isn't for us.
Fitbits, okay. Well, sort of Fitbits. You could maybe tell us a tiny bit in your thoughts on those things. But Martina has a Fitbit that records her sleep. She only has deep sleep of less than 10 minutes a night, so quality of sleep. Even when she used a different watch, still only measured 8 minutes sleep. Seems very little. What can I do to help her? She's 13 and goes to bed at 9:30 and up at 7. So it seems like the hours of sleep are okay. Just the quality of sleep.
I'm not really convinced necessarily that those wearables are a good indication of your actual sleep phases. First of all, it sounds like your child is getting a good amount of sleep. I wonder, how does she feel? Does she feel well rested? And I guess if you were reporting that she's getting that level of sleep and she doesn't feel well rested, again, I would sometimes want to get bloods done to see if there's any iron, mineral deficiencies and things like that, because often you're getting enough sleep, but you're not feeling well rested, and the quality of the sleep is undermined.
There's one here, the old saying, the hour before 12 is better than all the hours after 12. I never heard that one. At least I don't think I did. Have you heard that one?
Yeah, I have heard it, and I suppose there is a level of merit, like there's conventional wisdom around it. Okay, we're having deeper sleep earlier on in the evening time, but again, I try not to get too bound up in that, because I just really try to see what can we establish and what can we grow, if that makes sense to you, because sometimes some young children just can't get to sleep much before 11 or even 12 in some instances. And if we're then working off that, we're really sort of undermining ourselves a little bit. And I think I talk to families about trying to control the controllables, if that makes any sense to you.
Yep. I noticed a few things going through on the chat there about device management, which is family link on the Google, and then Apple Screen Time as well for the Apple system. They're good.
Yeah, absolutely. I see that there. And I think it's wonderful to share what's worked for a family, because that can help another family. I'm going to be honest, I'm not hugely up to date on the apps that help and around that, but it's wonderful to see recommendations for them in the chat tonight.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's the work of it being a parent, I suppose, but it's hard to keep on top of all that. I know from my own house that, the phones change rapidly, and you have to dig out and you just remember to do it on the next phone. And it's something that's hard to keep on top of, all the changes. But yeah, it's just part of the job, I guess.
It's true. It's true.
Okay, just trying to see a bit more. Let me just go back to my document here. Yeah, there's lots of things around sport and up early for swimming and other sports, and
yeah, two things like swimming normally is early, and then other training is maybe late in the night. I guess it's difficult. It's a difficult balance. And I suppose, I think I even saw one question at the early start of this is, how do you convince your child to stop studying? Now, what I'd like to know, how do you get a child like that, first of all? And second of all, I guess it's just trying to make sure that we can, have them engaged in all these extracurricular activities. But obviously, if something is losing and it's sleep that's losing, then I would be making very conscious decisions around maybe how many nights we do that. And, what's the cost and what's the benefit of both? And I understand the benefits and I also understand the costs. So it's just trying to find that balance within a family. Yeah.
Everybody's situation is different, of course. Nightmares. How is it possible to help a child that struggles a lot with bad dreams, nightmares? Any thoughts on that?
And I think they're a normal part of development, first of all. And again, I suppose it depends on which theorist you might listen to in terms of dreams and being the road to the unconscious, and, alerting us to maybe things that need to be dealt with. Generally with young children with nightmares, it's developmental. It's maybe what they've been exposed to. It's how they're processing things. Again, whenever we have something like that happens in sleep, like sleep talking, when there are obviously family sort of gene systems there where we often see it running in families, when we have any of those sleep considerations, overtiredness is a big part of it. And so as a result of that, I'll always first look at getting them better rested in any of the ways that we've tried to talk about tonight.
Yeah, there's some nice things going through in the chat, things around music and all sorts of good ideas around apps and things. But any recommendations for a child who won't take melatonin that was prescribed via ADHD? Any suggested alternatives, natural or otherwise?
I actually don't, because it's just not an area that's within my scope. The only, let's say, natural alternatives, we've talked about them there. I think there's another one called valerium, but again, it's an area that I really don't know enough about.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. The Calm app, somebody has mentioned that. I don't know if there's one you've come across.
There's loads out there, and I think somebody else said as well, about does anyone really feel well rested? And I think that's a really good point. No, not necessarily. Life is stressful, it's difficult, there's lots going on, there's lots of pressures on us. That's the whole part of modern life. But I guess it's important to see, kind of check in to see how you feel, especially if you are getting enough sleep and then getting enough sleep and you still feel not great, that kind of way. And I think everything has to be looked at in context. That I don't think any of us, myself included, hop out the bed with the joys of the spring every morning. But I suppose what I will be able to say is that I'm prioritizing it, and I'm doing everything that I can to look at what I'm eating, what I'm drinking, and what time I'm going to sleep at, and the environment that I'm collecting. So as a result of that, then how does that weigh up with my life and my relationship to work and school and everything else that goes on? I think it's probably better to look at things as a whole.
Yeah. Just one there that came in, Elaine, saying there, what's the latest time homework study should be cut off in the evening? And I suppose you sort of you can answer it again maybe, but it's that idea of winding down and, getting into that routine of just kind of calming down before bedtime, and you can't just go from study straight to bed, I don't think.
Yeah, that's the thing, you see, and I suppose it kind of depends on what time you've agreed that bedtime is going to be. Okay, and I suppose that's going to vary in all the different households, and it's going to depend on, like, there's no point me saying, look, have homework finished by 8 o'clock if you're at dance until 8 and then you need to do your homework. So again, it's really difficult, but I'm sure that, you know, we can do our best to organize it in such a way that we're giving this sort of lead in time. I think I talked about last week as being like a segue to sleep, that we have this bridge into where we're not going from high level activity and stress of homework and training and then expecting our children to lights out and go to sleep. We are maybe building this bridge with relaxing activities that may or may not include apps that have been talked about here tonight. But let's say if I just look at organic and connected activities, that we're working on. And look, I know that I see somebody there say it's very difficult when the anxiety from her constant homework and all she's doing studying late at night. And again, it's for us to try and help them create the balance between everything. Like, there's lots of pressure on our children. I'm more than aware of this. And again, you know, school success and being motivated and doing all of those things. So it's just trying our best to create that level for our children and providing the context, as I spoke about earlier.
Okay, listen, I think we're nearly covered. We covered a huge amount of ground here tonight, and it's getting up in and around 10 past. So what I might do is begin to draw a line under this and just explain where to from here, if that's okay with you, Lucy.
Yeah, it's perfect. And just one little question that came in there, because I actually did miss this slide, even though I did say it later. We are looking for 8 to 10 hours in this age range. That is the most recent data in terms of how much sleep our children potentially need.
Yeah. And I just want to show you a couple of things here. This is, if you can see that. So that's the Planet Youth website. And if you can see up here on the resources, right, there's a videos section, and that's where we're going to put a recording up probably over the weekend. I'll email everybody that's on the registration list to let you know it's there. Lucy will have her slides good to go, I think maybe early next week. And what we'll do is we'll pop them up there as well. And I'll let everybody know where you can go to get the recording of this event, the slides. I'll probably timestamp things a bit. So we'll go through the questions that were asked, the kind of steps of Lucy's presentation. My presentation will be there. So it'll be, you know, relatively easy format for people to access and to digest. You can also get a lot more information about the Project the County reports, which will kind of tell you everything about that there is to know about growing up as a young person in the west of Ireland. And they're actually quite interesting. All sorts of correlations to tell you really everything, you know, how our kids are getting on. So they're kind of interesting documents. And just to touch on this quickly, sort of pertinent to a couple of questions that were coming in on the chat, right? So this is the website live. I'm looking at it here on a separate kind of browser on Internet Explorer, so I don't want to mess with the presentation. But so this is where the videos will be. They'll be in here under resources. Okay, you can see this is where we put the one last week's one, Lucy, the national school one. And the other thing I want to draw people's attention to is this. This is a website that we built during the summer, right, which is called TheFacts. You can see up here, top of the screen, TheFacts. And as you can see here, the website has been developed for use as a teaching resource. The purpose is to provide teachers with up-to-date and local information that will help inform discussion in the classroom and support the delivery of modules within the SPHE curriculum. So what we have on the site, for example, if you're in a school in Galway Mayo or Roscommon, it returns the data to you, right, about these 12 topics of sleep and bullying, cyberbullying, screens, substance use, friendships, physical health, mental health, being connected, peer pressure, sexting, actually a bit of an issue with our kids, sexual health as well is in there. I'll just click on the sleep one quickly. And so the idea is that the teacher will put this to the classroom, right? So what percentage of students said they are getting enough sleep, right? Now, these will vary from county to county, but broadly speaking, they're very, very similar, all the kids across the counties. But okay, so it shows them how much sleep the kids are getting. It begins to show then a bit of information in the cross tabulations, right? So students that sleep for less than 6 hours are nearly 8 times more likely to feel anxious or depressed compared to students who sleep for 8 hours or more. There's one here on and around mental health. So students that had sleeping problems in the last week are over 5 times more likely to report poor mental health and the impact on self-esteem. 6 times more likely to have high self-esteem if you're sleeping well than the kids who aren't, right? Another one, I think it came in a couple of ways about this is screen time and some of the impacts of spending a lot of time on social media. So these are the, 30, 29, 30, 31, depends on the county you're in, but broadly speaking, around 30% use or excessive screen use. Certainly it impacts on anxiety, cyberbullying, all sorts of things, right? Impacts on your schoolwork. But here we go. So sleeping problems. So students are using social media for 4 hours a day or more, 60% more likely to have sleeping problems than those who don't use social media. So there is an impact. I know there was a question came in about how much and exactly precisely and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of research out there now. People have done studies on, screen time and how that impacts sleep and mental health and all sorts of things. This is just our kind of local data here in West of Ireland. So I just thought that might interest you to have a quick look at that. So that's something that we put together for use in our schools, for teachers to lead out on that are doing SPHE. But by the way, there isn't a module in SPHE on sleep. It's not something that's actually covered in the curriculum anywhere, oddly. I've seen this is actually an incredibly impactful area of our lives. There's very little being done about it. Let me just stop sharing that and to say that, back to this idea of, bringing in changes and, providing the environment for our kids earlier, really, and earlier the better. The primary prevention model has been used to great effect in Iceland. It really has almost transformed their country. So it sounds like really, hyperbolic statement, but it's actually the case. It's been remarkable, some of the outcomes. But what they say is they never make the children responsible for their health, right? They say the community, the adults are responsible for the health of the children, right? And the reason they took that approach is when they started down this path of primary prevention 25 years ago, they looked extensively at what was working in child education around the world. And broadly speaking, health education doesn't work that well. It really doesn't. It doesn't change behaviors very much. So even giving this information to kids, which we try to do through that website, it's not going to change a whole pile. All the evidence says that it won't, right? Information is good, but it doesn't really impact behavior a whole pile. What we can do as parents is change the environment somewhat to help them, to assist them in the change. And there's all sorts of things that we're trying to address through the project at large. And that's more or less what I wanted to say, other than you'll all get that email probably Monday now with a link. That's really about, I think, where we could wrap it up. Lucy, what do you think? Is there any final statements, do you think, or anything else you'd like to say?
No, I hope it was okay.
I thought it was very good. A lot of food for thought. And as I was saying to you on Wednesday when we did the national school presentation, it's a lot of information to take in. And there's fabulous stuff coming up through the chat and great ideas for everybody. So thanks everybody for contributing. And like that, the recording it'll be time stamped somewhat, because there's this load of information coming in. You'll have a chance to go back and refer to the bit that interested you most. But there was loads in there, Lucy. And thanks very much for going to all the trouble and the work that I know you've put into this. So
well, thank you, and look, thanks for everyone for joining us, Emmet, because it's I think we are all in it. It's our lived experience, all of us, and I suppose it's just about continued learning, information for ourselves, and helping us all help our children.
Thanks for that. And thanks, guys. Thanks for coming. I'm going to hit this hang up button and everything's just going to stop so you can go back to your lives. And thanks once again. Thanks, Lucy. And we'll see you again sometime.
Thanks, Emmet. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.